When I hear resentment, what I'm really hearing is grief most of the time. Grieving the childhood we never got to have. We are going to train our nervous system to have a different response is by doing the hard thing. Community care is just as important as self-healing. I always tell my clients, no child is raised by the same parent. Everyone that you get into a relationship with, they're not going to be a best friend. And I think it's important to understand the spectrum of friendship and the spectrum of community in your life.
Hi guys, and welcome back to Real the Expert series. It is episode 10, the final episode of the series, and I am absolutely stunned with how much I've learned this season. We've spent the season talking about ADHD, anxiety, high-functioning depression, trauma, so many of the challenges that affect our mental health. But there's one thing that kept coming up in every conversation, and it's that so many of us are struggling alone. Despite feeling more connected than ever, I feel like so many of us are still struggling with severe loneliness and also just not knowing where they belong. So today, we're talking about sibling relationships, family relationships, friendships, and why connection might be one of the most vital parts to having a good mental health. Joining me is therapist, author, and mental health educator Minaa B. Her work focuses on relationships, emotional wellness, and community care, and she truly is bringing us the missing piece to why so many of us are feeling so lonely. We're diving into the hardships of sibling relationships, codependency, friendships, community, chosen family, and how to build meaningful relationships in a world that can increasingly feel disconnected. Thank you guys so much for tuning in this season. It has been an honor and a privilege, and we will be back for season 2. Yes, that's right. We will be back for a season 2 in the fall. If you haven't already, be sure to give us a 5-star rating and review. Leave in the comments what topics you want to see next season. And thank you so much to every single person that has participated, commented, left us a nice DM. Every single interaction truly made this season possible. I love you guys so much and enjoy this episode. Mena, thank you so much for coming on. I'm so excited to have you today.
Thank you, Carly. I'm really excited to be here.
So I'm obsessed with the fact that you do so much on family relationships and sibling relationships. I feel like not a lot of mental health professionals are specifically focusing on that. How did that come about and how did you get into that?
So it first started with my own experience as a sibling. I come from a blended family, so I'm the youngest of 13, which is a huge. So I have a lot of data to comb through when it comes to sibling dynamics. Yeah. But I earned my social work degree from NYU. And when I was studying, we spent a lot of time talking about the parent-child relationship. So when I went out into the real world, I started working with families. I noticed that a lot of my clients were struggling in their sibling relationships, but there wasn't much data for me to rely on because I spent most of my time in school learning about the parent-child relationship. So I had to take on my own work by researching, okay, all the information we have on attachment theory, all the information we know around family systems. How can we take what we already know, but apply it to the sibling dynamic? Yeah. And that is when I started to notice that there are so many people who are having a particular experience within their nuclear family. And it's not just with their parent, it's actually with their sibling.
Yeah. And I even feel like so many of my friends or people in my life, they have closeness with their sibling, but there's a lot of unsaid. Is that something that came up for you when you were doing your research?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it fits into the family dynamic of what happens in a home stays in the home and we kind of sweep things under the rug. So a lot of people are kind of just gliding through life with this sense of closeness with their sibling, but no one is really talking about what it felt like, for example, to know that you were the more favored child. What did it feel like for you to be the scapegoat? We grew up knowing that mom and dad blamed you for everything. Every time you tried to bring issues up, we see how you're minimized. We see how you're dismissed, right? And so what I find is that siblings are not just dealing with the issues within the family dynamic between their parent. Sometimes there's a lot of unsaid tension between the siblings because they're thinking to themselves, you never stood up for me. You don't acknowledge how mom and dad treat me. You don't see the pain that I experienced, or think of age gaps.
Yeah.
Maybe if you are 7 to 8 years older, I had to be the sibling who struggled and I watched you get a better life than I did.
Yeah.
Or I was the parentified child and nobody ever thinks of me because it's always been my responsibility to take care of you. You don't realize the sacrifices that I had to make, and I had to give up most of my childhood so that you could have a childhood in return.
Yeah.
So I think there are so many stories that aren't spoken of within sibling dynamics, and I think a lot of siblings just don't know how to approach them.
Yeah. And even when you said about an age gap, my sister and I are 6 years apart. Okay. So I often felt like later in life, all of these issues started to come up for me where I was like, we took care of her, she came first, and then where was I in that? And I kind of felt like I had to parent myself. How, if you've never had those conversations before with a sibling, how do you begin to even explain your experiences in a way that like they can understand, and in a way that's approachable too, because it's scary if you've never had deep conversations like that before.
Yeah, it can definitely be scary, but I think that it can be done.
Yeah.
Right. I do think taking the time out to have that conversation can look like not just talking about your experience, but being curious about your sibling's experience as well. Because I always tell my clients, no child is raised by the same parent. Right? There are age gaps, cultural influence, gender, all of those things play a role in how children are raised and how parents respond to their child. Even temperament. Research shows that gender and temperament are the two things that influence how parents respond to their children. So if a child, for example, has a temperament that is more favorable to the parent, they may seem as if they are the favorite child because they abide by the parent's rules, they don't break boundaries, so they make parenting feel easy for that parent compared to the other child, right? So I think it's really important for us to not just center our experience as a sibling, but to be curious about the relationship your sibling has as well. So when it comes to having that conversation, I think it's important to say, hey, we never really talk about our childhood. I'm curious to know what it was like for you, because I'm wondering if we relate to one another, because these are the experiences I had growing up. This is how I felt about mom. This is what it felt like having a large age gap. I'm curious to know, since I had to do so much caretaking for you, did that ever interfere with your ability to come to me and be vulnerable? Did you feel like I was more of a parent than your sibling? Right? So I think it's really important to, of course, talk about what happened to you, but don't just center yourself in that experience, because your sibling had an experience too. So be curious and invite them into the conversation.
Yeah, I feel like that's honestly like hits hard, because the first thing I think a lot of people want to do is just dump, which is but it's normal, not in a bad way. Just like you want to dump and talk about your experience, but it leaves less room, and it comes maybe with a bit of judgment too towards the other person. And also resentment comes up for me. Not resentment towards my sibling, but I'm saying the idea of resentment in general. Yeah. How do you deal with resentment in adulthood when you maybe felt left behind as in your childhood, or just were treated differently?
You know, when I hear resentment, what I'm really hearing is grief most of the time. Grieving the childhood we never got to have, and grieving the relationship with our siblings we wished we had, because sometimes that resentment is there. I notice in my client work, because you can't go back and change your childhood, so now you have maybe this awkward tension in your sibling relationship, or you're not as close with them, or you feel like because this happened when we were kids, it impacts us now as adults. And I think what's really at the root of that resentment is the grief. And I do think that if we give ourselves permission to honor the fact that grief is there, that there are some experiences that we can't change, but we can create new experiences, I think that's a beautiful thing. So I would just encourage people to think of, don't focus on what you can't change, right? Grieve that, but what can you do differently? And can you take the first step in creating the relationship that you want with your sibling?
Do you think that if people don't properly grieve their childhood and the things that they wish they had but didn't, that in their adulthood they may be more stuck?
Sometimes that can happen. I do find that there are times where people are still carrying so much pain regarding maybe how they were treated, especially when it comes to sibling dynamics. Because sometimes those dynamics are still actually playing out in adulthood. You realize as a child, I was the scapegoated kid. I still am the scapegoated adult. I am still being compared to my sibling. I am still being told, oh, they got married before you. They have children before you. They went to college. They have a nicer home. They have a better job. So sometimes those stories are still lingering. And I think that can also bring up some of the resentment. But I also think that we have to ask ourselves, who is the resentment toward and who is the anger toward?
Yeah.
Is it really toward my sibling because of the choices that they made, or is it more so toward my parent?
Right.
The person who is pitting us against each other, the person who is constantly comparing, the person who is constantly putting me down.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important because sometimes I'll see animosity between siblings and they didn't cause any of it. A lot of it is the parent who is at the center of that pain, but it's easier to be mad at my brother or mad at my sister than it is to say, Mom, you really hurt my feelings when you compare us, and I don't like it, and I wish you would stop doing that. That's harder for a lot of people, you know? And so I just encourage people to think about who the anger is for, because I think that can also play a role in healing some of that grief and resentment, because you start to realize it has nothing to do with my sibling. It has a lot to do with the other family members that existed in the home, maybe my parents or grandparents, whoever it was, that I have some of this animosity toward. And if I can learn to heal that, that can also help me in my sibling relationship.
Yeah. Have you ever seen, kind of on the flip side, siblings banding together because or in spite of their parents?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a very, very common thing.
Yeah.
So research shows that when children are raised in homes where there is low family cohesion, which is a family that's characterized by poor emotional attunement, detachment, and pretty much numbness. And so sometimes it's an emotionally immature parent. It's a parent that is emotionally enmeshed with their child, or just parents that are really hands off. So they don't do the work of fostering togetherness in their home.
Right.
And sometimes in those families as well, there is a lot of conflict and tension, sometimes between the parents. And so because there's a lot of emotional neglect, the children may actually form a bond with each other as a protective factor against the neglect that they're experiencing with their parents.
Yeah.
So trauma impacts people so differently, right? Sometimes we think that because you grew up in a particular environment, you may not understand love, you may not know how to be nurturing or emotionally attuned to the needs of others. But when you have a sibling, depending on how your relationship is formed with your sibling, especially when they're closer in age, or sometimes when there's an age gap, because the eldest sibling might be more of a mother figure. Because most of the time, unfortunately, if the eldest is a daughter, she experiences so much labor and emotional labor in the home. And so there's a stronger likelihood that the children will have a closer bond despite the emotional neglect and the poor cohesion that they're experiencing in their family environment.
Yeah. I feel like I see it a lot. And even watching TV shows, it reminds me of the show Shameless. Like I don't know if you've ever seen it, but the dynamics is like the parents kind of, one was a drug addict and one kind of was never present. And then the daughter, the eldest daughter, becomes kind of the glue for the family. So it reminds me a lot of that. If any listeners have seen it, it really does. I also want to talk about siblings that might have struggles and dealing with that, such as like a sibling having a drug problem, a sibling dealing with like just any severe mental health issue. How can that impact like the family system, but also your relationship with your sibling?
Yeah. There's a lot of detrimental factors at play when a sibling does have a mental illness or when there is an addiction and there isn't any treatment involved and there's no help being given to the sibling, or maybe they're not being proactive in that process as well. Data does show that it can actually fracture the family system in general, because that drug problem is no longer just one person's issue. It becomes a family issue, which is why they refer to addiction as a family disease, because it leaves a ripple effect. Right. So everyone is doing what they can to support this particular sibling, maybe physically, emotionally, and financially. And generally, too, when you're dealing with an addiction, there's a strong likelihood that you will relapse before you engage in sobriety. So there can be a lot of mental toll on everyone in the family. What I find in sibling dynamics is first that the other siblings in the home who do not struggle with maybe an illness or an addiction can often feel invisible because now all of the labor and attention is going to the sibling who needs the most help, who is a little more vulnerable, and probably needs more support within the family system. So other siblings tend to feel more invisible, and that impacts the sibling bond because sometimes they may have resentment toward the sibling. But it's a very difficult feeling too, because I've worked with siblings where they're like, I understand it, and I'm also angry.
Yeah.
Right? So it's about recognizing two things can be true at once. I have so much empathy and compassion for my sibling, and I'm really upset.
Yeah.
That this is what they're going through and how it impacts all of us.
And it's like, how do you know when to step away or when to kind of, because it's affecting you and because it's taking a toll on your life versus stepping in? Like, how do you know where that boundary is?
I always say I think people innately know. It's hard to give language to it.
Yeah.
But I will say I think we innately know when a line is being crossed, when we can't give, especially financially. You know your account better than anybody else, right? You know your finances better than anyone else. Can I continue to help with paying for rehab? Probably not, because of XYZ when it comes to my budget. Emotionally, if I realize that I'm doing so much and maybe all that I'm doing isn't enough, it's not helping my sibling, that might mean that I need to bring in other resources. Or it might mean I have to figure out what my boundaries might have to be. Yeah. Now, your boundaries can ebb and flow. It doesn't mean that you have to say today, I'm no longer helping my sibling at all. It could look like, you know what, maybe for the next month, I need to take a step back, ask my brother or my sister or my parent, or just let my sibling know, listen, I can't contribute. I can't show up this way for the next couple of weeks, or at least for this season. Right? It doesn't mean I'm never going to be available again. Right. But right now, I need to replenish my cup. Yeah. Right. So I do think it's really important to understand that, because there are going to be times where you can be in it and there are going to be times where you can't. And I think that's a dance. I don't think it's a hard line that once we get to this place, it'll be that forever. Yeah. Right. And so I do think it's just about knowing innately what you can do, what you have the capacity to do, but also pay attention to your own bodily reaction. Pay attention to your symptoms. Are you sleeping at night? Are you eating? Are you overeating or undereating? Are you finding yourself ruminating and consistently stressed out about your sibling? Those are often signs that maybe you're a little too involved. Yeah. And maybe over involved in the process of helping or being there. And maybe you just need to find a way to take a step back. And that might mean, again, asking other family members to contribute or relying on local resources as a measure to help you navigate that process.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like so many people ignore the physical symptoms that come with their stress because we're just, I don't know, maybe it's just we're taught that kind of as a society or as women, but so often I see that happen. And then what about siblings or parents even that kind of can't respect those boundaries and they maybe try to, it feels like they're only there when they need something. How do you, and you just so desperately want to be close with them, but it feels like, hey, I'm just reaching out, I need money. I need a place to stay. I need to tell you about something that's going on in my life, but I'm not going to ask about your life. How do you then set a boundary there when you still, because you still crave the closeness, so you don't want to lose it?
The first thing I would say is that a lot of people engage in behaviors that they think are normal. And I do think sometimes we have to call that behavior out to say, in this relationship, it's not normal. So I notice you only call me when you want money. And to be in a relationship with me, I really value reciprocity where people actually check in on me. Yeah. If that's all you want, money, and it's a transactional relationship, I can't give that to you. But I think naming it and talking about it is important because, again, the person initiating that behavior, that's normal to them. And again, you can grow up in the same home, but have different customs around how, and different mannerisms, different etiquette around how you approach things, again, because of personality, temperament, age gaps, culture, gender, all of those things can influence how we show up with one another. So I think it's important to name the issue.
Yeah.
Because to that person, they're doing it because they think it's normal most of the time. So I would say that to be the first thing. The second thing is ask yourself what the boundary needs to be. So if the person is only calling you, if your brother or sister is only calling you because they want money, ask yourself, can I say no? Can I give myself permission to say no? Because one, I don't like this being a transactional relationship. And two, maybe I just don't have it. And I don't want this to be the nature of what our relationship is, where you feel that the only time you reach out to me is because you need something from me.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to exercise that boundary by one, discerning what that boundary needs to be, and then exercising it, but also having conversations around that, because I do think sometimes in families, we normalize a lot of behaviors that are dysfunctional, and we create this belief that, well, because you're my sister, of course you're going to loan me money. Because you're my brother, of course you're going to babysit. Of course you're going to do this thing because the concept of loyalty. And I think we have to let people know, this is how I view loyalty. You have to earn my respect. I'm not just going to give it to you because of blood. Right? And so if you want a relationship with me, this is what I'm asking of you. And if you can't give it, just understand that this is how I'm going to respond to you moving forward.
Yeah. What if you feel like you can't? Or what if you feel like, I don't know, I find that a lot of people, when it comes to their siblings, the people pleaser kicks in. I mean, even on a smaller scale with me, I find it like if my sister needs something, I'm there, even if it inconveniences me to a fault. Why does that come up?
I find that when we have siblings, we tend to regress into childhood patterns that we utilized to protect ourselves. As well as, and this happens to people even if you don't have a sibling, right? But when you do have a sibling, from childhood, you learned how to be in relationship with that person. This is not the same as going to college and meeting a new friend. This is the person that you most likely grew up with. So you learned from an early age how to be in a relationship with them. And it's possible that from an early age, you learned how to be a people pleaser in your home. It's not something you just developed at 21. Maybe from the time you were 6, you and your brother or your sister bickered so much, you learned to give in easily, or it would turn into a fight over a toy. Or when you're 14, it turns over a fight of, you're wearing my clothes, I asked you not to, but your sister has more of an aggressive or assertive personality, so therefore you back down because you don't want to deal with her anger, her being emotionally volatile. You don't want to deal with that. So these are patterns you learned from a very early age. And I find that these patterns tend to manifest a lot around the holidays, right? When it's time to organize and say, can you do this or can you do that? Or even when families are coming together, we might regress to our childhood tactics to keep ourselves safe. Right? So if I remember my sister used to yell at me when I was 15, she might still yell at me now at 27 or 30, right? So I do think that the only way we are going to train our nervous system to have a different response is by doing the hard thing. And I know a lot of people do not like hearing me say that, but what's happening is our brains crave familiarity. So if I know my sister has a particular attitude, my brother responds a certain way, I know how to navigate that situation by people pleasing. That's the familiar response, because I know if I do this thing, they're going to back down. They're going to leave me alone. They're not going to triangulate and call mom and say, can you believe Carly said no, she won't babysit this weekend, right? I know how to navigate this situation. But sometimes we have to teach our brain a new method. And the only way the brain is going to get familiar with the new method is if we start it. We have to be willing to start. So that means you have to be willing to say no at some point. And I think it goes back to what I said earlier. Boundaries can be flexible. So if I don't want to babysit this weekend, it doesn't mean I'm never going to babysit. But I already have plans. So I have a right to say no because I actually have something that I'm doing. But next weekend, I'm free. I'll do it for you. Right? So it doesn't necessarily mean, I think sometimes too, we think a boundary means this permanent wall that we have to put up and I'll never do this thing again. Once I set this boundary, this is what it is forever. Boundaries are always ebbing and flowing. You get to decide when you want to erect them and when you need them and when you don't need them.
Yeah.
So I would encourage people to see it that way too, because if we think of it from a perspective of, I'm never going to do this thing and this is what my boundary is and they're going to have this particular reaction to me responding this way, it can feel really daunting.
Yeah.
But just think about the moment. In this moment, what is the boundary? Because tomorrow it might be a different boundary.
Right. Yeah, and it's kind of that black and white thinking, I feel like, that a lot of people have, where it's like, if I put my foot down, this is how it's always going to be. So I like that idea of it being kind of this flowing method versus so harsh. Something else I saw you talk about, codependency with siblings. Can you talk a little bit about what that dynamic looks like and how to tell if there's some codependency there?
Yeah. So it goes back to what I mentioned earlier around children who grow up in poor, cohesive families. Because there's emotional neglect and detachment, sometimes when the siblings do turn to each other to bond, they can bond in a healthy way. Sometimes that bonding gets to a place where it's a little too enmeshed.
Right.
So I don't know where I end and where you begin. Whatever is bothering Carly, it bothers me. If you went through a breakup, I'm in distress. If you're burnt out from work, I'm burnt out in general. If you're struggling with something, I can't even make it through the next day because your pain becomes my pain. So that is often what codependency as well as emotional enmeshment looks like, because the two of them tend to have a dance with one another. And again, that often just comes from when children are in this particular environment where there is a lack of love, nurture, and support. Or there are times where, as you mentioned earlier, right? Let's say a parent has an addiction or a mental illness, or if a parent passes away. If parents split and they divorce and you went from a two-parent home to now a one-parent home, right? Now you're going back and forth between homes sometimes too. Children are always looking for ways to bond and ask themselves, where do I belong?
Yeah.
And sometimes I might find that belonging in my sibling. But sometimes it gets to a place where if you feel like you can't function or breathe without the permission of your sibling, if your sibling's stress becomes your stress and you don't know how to sit with them and their stress and maybe provide them with tools and strategies, but instead you're crying, so now I'm crying, and we're both just like, in this pool of sadness, that shows that the relationship has become a little codependent and enmeshed. And another layer that I find is the rescuing. I find often that in sibling relationships, especially when there is an eldest daughter involved in taking care of a younger sibling, there becomes this codependent dynamic of the eldest daughter consistently having to rescue and save the younger sibling. So they could put themselves in harm's way. The eldest daughter will jump in the road and get hit by the car for them.
I would.
Right, exactly. Right. And what that does sometimes is it creates a pattern where now the youngest child is not building the tools that they need to be resilient. Because I know when things are hard, my big sister is just going to jump in and take the bullet for me.
Right.
I'm never going to have to deal with hardship because someone else is going to absorb it for me. So that's another way where codependency comes up, where it's a lot of saving and rescuing, where someone kind of is the damsel in distress, the infant-like person who they're so delicate, they're so fragile, you can't drop the baby, or they're going to cry. You have to be so delicate with this child. And you have to remember sometimes that relationship dynamic happens when you were a child yourself. You also deserve care. You also deserve to be treated with that same nurture and kindness, right? But I do find that eldest daughters who become parentified can develop that codependent dynamic where it's like, I have to rescue because I've been put in this space of being responsible for them, and they don't know how to put up a boundary, which is sometimes you are going to have to feel pain, especially from your own choices, because that's a common thing where it's like you're making choices, now you have to deal with the consequences of it. I can't keep running into the street to get hit by the car for you. You put yourself in the street. So now I'm going to have to watch you figure out how to get out of that situation. And that's a way codependency can also come up.
That even reminds me of maybe a sibling being in a relationship that you don't like. And I think so often as a friend or as a sibling, we try to stop things from happening when you have to let the inevitable kind of happen.
Exactly. Because that's how we learn. That is how we develop self-efficacy, which is the belief in oneself that I can change. But if I am not giving myself an ability to go out there and recognize the tools that I have inwardly and exercise them, I'm never really going to be able to grow. So I also, when I'm working with my clients who struggle with codependency, I often encourage them to see it from a lens of the same way you want your sister or your brother to be well, you also have to play a role in that by letting them make their own choices, because you're hindering their growth by not allowing them to figure things out on their own. That's how we develop that muscle. If I go into the gym and I never worked out and I start at 20 pounds, it's going to be hard. But I can use my own wisdom to recognize maybe I should start at 5 pounds and increase that weight going forward, right? But if you pick the weight up for me, then I don't have to do anything, you know? So I encourage people to realize too that by stepping out the way, it is not putting them in harm's way. It's actually giving them the tools. It's like, here's the life vest. Now go jump into the water. And figure it out. But you're not going to drown. You have the life vest on because I gave you the tools already to support you.
Yeah, it's so true. Like the first time you do it is the most painful. And then it's a muscle that you have to just keep training and working. So for family relationships and parents, I find that in my kind of early 20s, in my adulthood, my dynamics have changed so much, especially as someone who comes from a household where we're so close and so together all the time. I have struggled, and I find other people struggle with setting a boundary or explaining that now I'm an adult and I might miss a couple days of our family vacation, or I might not be available to come to every single holiday. How do you recognize when things are becoming overbearing or you have to set a boundary?
I would say the first thing that you recognize is the stress that it puts on your body. Those interactions, the stress and the warning signs are there. When you come around your parent, you might notice your heart starts to race, you're sweating, the family trip is being planned, and you already know you're going to Mexico during that weekend. You do not want to go on the family trip. You already told the girls in the group chat what you're going to do. Now your family is planning this thing and you feel yourself sweating. Pay attention to bodily cues. Right? How does your body respond to stress? Right? So that's the first sign to be able to recognize this thing feels really hard for me to do, because my body is often the first responder. It's why my chest feels really tight. It's why I started sweating out of nowhere. It's why my stomach hurts. Right? I'm hearing everyone talk about this thing and I feel knots in my stomach because I need to let them know I don't plan to be there. Right? So that's the first thing. I would say the second thing that you can pay attention to is how you feel around your family in general. You know, is this going to be a peaceful trip for you? Is doing this thing going to make you feel good too? Do you still want to do the things that you normally did? It makes me think of, again, going back to the holidays when people say, finally, I don't want to go to my mom's house for Christmas. I want to host this time. Right. And so now there's this trajectory and this, I would say, this lineage of doing things one particular way. And now you want to break the cycle and you want to do something differently. So I would just encourage people to pay attention to the bodily cues. And it goes back to some of the things that I said earlier around recognizing that the first step is in the trying. It's in the trying. When you know in advance this thing is being brought up, talk to your parent about it. Talk to your family about it. Listen, I want to do things a little different this year. And it's not to upset you. It's because I've been doing this thing for so long and I love it. Maybe I do love it. Maybe you don't, right? But I want to do things a little different. Can we test that out and see how it feels for the both of us? Right? Because I do think that if we want community, especially with our family, it can also be equally important to consider other people's feelings without feeling obligated to please them or tend to their feelings. I can be in a relationship with you, and if we've been doing one thing the same way forever, I can expect that if I decide to change, it might be a little hard for you. So I always encourage people also to think about the same compassion you want. Can you extend that to other people? That doesn't mean breaking the boundary, but it just means understanding human emotion. It means understanding that Sometimes people will be disappointed by change. Sometimes because you're the person in therapy, you're learning the skill of setting the boundary. Right. You're learning the skill of being assertive. Right. You're learning the skill of learning to be emotionally attuned with your needs, and maybe the people around you aren't. Yeah. So can you show them a little compassion while still standing firm in the things that you want? Versus, I feel that when we're changing, we get really angry because people aren't responding healthily to our change. Yeah. And it's like, can you open your eyes just a little bit to see that they're still stuck in their ways maybe, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to stop doing what you want to do. Right. But I do think that when we have a little more compassion for people's feelings, we can understand them a little better. Yeah. And say, I get why this might make you upset, Mom. I do. Yeah. I'm still not going to come. True. But I get why you're mad. Yeah. And I really do hope that you can work through some of this anger. Yeah. Versus, I can't believe you got upset. Right? There's a huge difference between those two things. Yeah. And I think that when we really respond with kindness and compassion and understanding, while again remaining assertive, that can allow us to still have the glue in the community that we want. Yeah. And sometimes we might realize that maybe that glue won't be there over time. Yeah. But I think the first step is the willingness to be compassionate to other people's feelings in the process.
It's also interesting how culture, I feel like, plays a role in these conversations. I know growing up in like a Jewish household, Jewish mom guilt is like a very real thing. And I'm sure across cultures, there's similar but different versions of it. How, as you get older, when your value systems are changing and you're learning to set those boundaries, like how do you explain that to them and like make them comfortable kind of with it? Because it's like you still want to be close to your parents. But the guilt sometimes is overwhelming of, oh, you're not going to go see your grandparents this weekend or you're not going to spend every holiday with us. It's like, do you not explain it? Do you kind of what you said, just stand firm and try to just be a little bit sensitive to where they're at?
I think you can do both. Yeah. But what I will say is when I heard you say make them a little more comfortable, I would reframe that to, can I make peace with their reaction and their response? Okay. Right? Because the comfort work requires you to now be their therapist and be more than you can be. Yes. That's their work to do. Yes. To get comfortable with change. That's on them. Yeah. You, the initiator of the change, can learn to make peace with knowing that some people just don't like change, right? And I think there's a huge difference in that because it's more freeing. Right. It's freeing in knowing there's not much I can do here other than to show up and be myself and explain whatever it is that I need to explain and let you do the rest of the work that belongs to you. Yeah. I, again, can be compassionate in that because like you said, my Jewish mother, for me, it could be my Panamanian mother and whoever's listening, right? Whatever culture you come from, right? It's knowing that, one, they never got to make those choices. So they don't understand this. Right. What do you mean you're not doing this or you're not going to do that? Yeah. So I do think it's about learning to make peace with knowing that you can't change people while still standing firm in your assertiveness. Yeah. And you can ask yourself, do I want to explain? That's something you can ask yourself. Is that something that I want to do? I do believe explaining is a courtesy, especially if you want to be in relationships with people. Right. Helping them understand your inner world, I think deepens intimacy. Yeah. And so I am always an advocate, if you can explain at least the first time, you can do that. Now, if it keeps getting brought up, you can just keep reiterating what you already said. We already had this conversation, Mom. Right. This is the reason why. Yeah. And I do get why this is really disturbing to you, but I just need you to understand this is the choice that I'm making. So that is what it looks like to still be assertive while also having some empathy and understanding of their feelings, while also knowing you don't have to now say, let's process what you feel right now, Mom. Yeah. Maybe we need to dive into your childhood, right? We don't have to go there, right? That's not your job. It's the awareness, it's the understanding, but then it's also the self-work of remaining assertive in the process. Yeah.
What about codependency with a parent and a child, or a parent and both siblings? How does that look different maybe from a sibling codependency? Or is it the same?
It can look the same. I would say the one key thing that might stand out is the triangulation piece. So and triangulation basically means when two people are having a conflict and a third party comes in who has nothing to do with the conflict. But let's say a parent is enmeshed with one child and that child is having conflict with the sibling, that parent might feel as if the conflict their child is having, well, child A is having with their sister, it's now my problem, right? So now the child on the other end might feel like both their sister and their mom are ganging up on them. The mom is taking sides. I always knew you were the favorite, right? And then I also noticed too, depending on how children are raised, and it goes back to temperament and the parenting style, there are some children who may react negatively to their parents' parenting style, while there are some children that might feel like they can't, I would say, disrupt the family system. And so they lean into whatever it is their parent expects of them. Right. So this kind of also goes back to the golden child scapegoat narrative, where it's like, your parenting style doesn't work for me, Mom. It just doesn't work for me. Where the sister doesn't feel comfortable saying that out loud. She may feel that way internally, but she's not willing to rock the boat.
Yeah.
So sometimes that can also lead to a sense of codependency between her and the mom. And now again, it creates this piece of 2 against 1.
Right.
Or sometimes that can happen when there are multiple siblings. Now, if we have a family of, 5 siblings and 3 of them are enmeshed and 2 of them are not enmeshed, the 3 might say, you guys are different. Why aren't you doing things this way? And they may feel like they have to intervene all the time. They may feel that it's their obligation and responsibility to know everything their sibling is doing. They may struggle with autonomy. I expect that you give me your location, I know where you are all the time. Right. And the other sibling, the youngest sibling, is like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Right? So I find that sometimes it can impact the children, especially if a parent is codependent and enmeshed with their child, because it can create this us versus them mentality within the family system.
Yeah. What about emotionally, like the parent kind of relying on the child for, and I've seen it a lot and in friends and even just hearing about it online, like kind of the parent dumping all of the trauma to the child, or every single day, 10 calls a day of everything when the child is trying to work or trying to have a normal life. How do you deal with that? And how can that be damaging to you?
That can be very damaging because that goes back into the emotional enmeshment piece, because the parent most likely does not have support in their life, adult support in their life, because sometimes that enmeshment can start when you're a child, but as you grow older, of course, you're becoming more autonomous. And so it's like, I don't necessarily have the same stronghold on you as I did when you were a child, because now you moved out, now you got married, now you have kids, you have a job, you have all these obligations that probably come before me. So I'm going to be a little more aggressive in trying to get your attention and lean on you for support. And it can lead to a lot of burnout.
Yeah.
It can lead to a lot of burnout. And one of the ways I also see this impact sibling relationships is if that parent latches on to one child, and so now they're being responsible for their parent. They feel that they have to answer all 10 calls. They have to deal with everything, while their siblings just get to go on vacation.
Right.
You go to work freely. You come home. You walk your dog. Yeah. You don't have to deal with mom. I do.
Right.
So that leads to some resentment, and it impacts the sibling relationship, especially when you are asking your siblings for support. Maybe you can call mom more because she's lonely and she's expecting me to fill that loneliness gap, and I can't. Can you step up?
Yeah.
And sometimes a sibling will and sometimes a sibling won't.
Yeah.
So that can lead to how some of the adult fractures that happen within sibling relationships. And that might happen too, because let's say that parent is latching onto that child because the rest of them are low contact for a reason.
Right.
So now you are the person who chose not to go low contact with mom or estranged from mom. So now you are absorbing all of mom's behavior, while the rest of them are like, well, I need you to respect that I stopped talking to her for a reason.
Yeah.
Right? So that can lead to a lot of adult fractures within the sibling relationship. Yeah. And I will say, when this happens, you know, the only way to really break free from this is to start putting certain parameters in place between you and the parent who's doing this, so that you can kind of buy back your freedom to some extent. So if they are calling your phone multiple times a day, do you have to put your phone on Do Not Disturb? Do you have to mute them? Right. There are different things that you might have to do. Yeah. And I want to say this stuff is going to be hard. It's going to be hard. There is no way to break cycles of dysfunction without it being hard.
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought of. I'm like, that stresses me out.
It's scary.
Like the thought of that, someone doing that, like the stress of it seems like even worse than the stress of them calling you.
Exactly, because it's anxiety inducing.
Yeah.
You know, you have this particular parent that presents with certain behaviors, and maybe you've tried in the past and you saw how they reacted, right? So it's not like you don't have data or evidence to show, and because you have data, that exasperates some of the anxiety even more, because you're like, I tried this once, she did not respond well, so if I do this again, I need more tools. Yeah. That's what that means.
Yeah.
I need more tools. I need the ability to withstand this much longer, because I gave in a little too quickly. I let her do whatever it is she did, that thing that she does, or whatever it is that she says that makes me feel really bad. She guilt trips. Yeah. I encourage you to, one, pay attention to manipulative tactics. Guilt tripping is one of them, which is when someone is trying to induce the feeling of guilt. Right. I'm your mother. What if I die? It's like the most, it's always real. The most extreme thing, right? I am your mother. What if it was an emergency? Is it an emergency? No, right? So pay attention to the guilt tripping thing, because that's what they tend to do. Where family, loyalty, those concepts. And again, sometimes this dynamic can also be exasperated when another sibling is in the same predicament, but they are okay with that predicament. So they might now come to you and say, why aren't you answering mom's calls? Right. Why are you being distant toward mom? Yeah. You're being mean. Now, again, the us versus them mentality. So I do think it's about, one, understanding manipulative tactics so that you recognize, oh, this is a maneuver. This is a game that's being played right now, so that they can get what they want. Yeah. Right? Because sometimes we feel guilty and we don't realize the guilt is being manufactured. It's not coming inward. It's because someone else is actually trying to make me feel bad for something that's actually reasonable. Right? So pay attention to manipulative tactics. And then I would also just say, increase your support system. Yeah. Self-regulation is important. Breath work, deep breathing, drawing, journaling, exercise, all of these tools that we can do by ourselves. But I truly believe when we're dealing with difficult family members, we need to co-regulate. I need a friend that I can call to say, my mom stressed me out this weekend. Yeah. Right? I need a therapist that I can rely on, who is in my circle of exchange, which are my paid and professional networks that I go to. I go to the sound bath healing class. I go to my therapist. I go to my acupuncturist, because these are the people who help me move stress out of my body. Yeah. So I do think that we have to ask ourselves, what's in my self-care toolbox? Because if I don't have many tools, then of course, when the storm comes, I'm not going to have shelter. Right. And my mom is the storm. Yeah. Right? So I need better tools. And I think it's important to just pay attention to tools that are, require just the self versus tools that invite community in. Yeah. Because that's relational trauma. Yeah. So to heal from relational trauma, we also need to be exposed to healthy relationships. Yeah. So I really, really encourage the co-regulation piece when you're trying to set boundaries with difficult family members.
Yeah, that's like the perfect transition, because I want to talk about community, and I love everything that you say about community and community care. Why is that so important? And especially in this day and age, I think we all think we're connected and we feel connected because of social media, but why is that like in-person connection so important?
So the former U.S. Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, shared that we were in a loneliness epidemic. And research was conducted that shows that loneliness has a mortality rate that is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Wow.
right? So the data is showing us that loneliness is putting tons of stress on the body. And if we don't engage in tools to mitigate that, we are shortening our lifespans. And in a world right now where people are focused on longevity, health, going to the gym, exercise, we don't realize relationships are actually the key thing that's going to play a role in longevity of life. So when we have community, one, it's playing a role in helping to navigate and heal relational trauma. It's also having a built-in support system. When there is social connectedness, social cohesion, and ability to have reciprocity in our relationships, we feel less alone because we also have resources. That's how resiliency works. I can be resilient because I have people I can lean on. I don't learn to be resilient simply by myself. We learn to be resilient because of our community. It's the people who band together, the people who come to bring you soup when you're sick, the people who are checking in with you when you're struggling, the people who actually want to know the good things and the bad things, the people that you go to brunch with, the people who come and sit on your couch when it's just a random evening and they're like, we don't want to go out, let's just hang out with each other. That is how we build intimacy, you know? And so I think a lot of people feel like they're more in community now because of social media. And I don't want to negate what social media can do. I have made plenty of friendships from people off social media that I've met in person. So it can be a gateway toward healthy reciprocal relationships. But that's the thing. It has to be leading somewhere. It has to be a vehicle that's leading you towards some level of intimacy. So I do think that when we have that in-person connection, we feel more seen. It releases the oxytocin in our brain. I think back during COVID, when research came out that showed that people were experiencing something called skin hunger, aka touch deprivation, and that increased depression and anxiety simply because they weren't being touched. A lack of touch started to increase depression, anxiety, right? So I do think it's really important for us to say, yeah, I have these social connections and they're great, but what am I doing to move the needle? So if I am connected to someone online who lives in the same state as me or is as local as I am, maybe I should initiate a coffee date. Or I can start off with a Zoom date. Let that progress into a coffee date. Our relationship should be progressing to some extent. Everyone that you get into a relationship with, they're not going to be a best friend. And I think it's important to understand the spectrum of friendship and the spectrum of community in your life. That should not be the goal, that I want to make Carly my BFF when I'm done today, right? It should be, I just want to be in a relationship with you. And I'll let that take shape however it does. And I think that's a missing ingredient because people are so hungry for a connection that they want to latch on immediately. And I think that's also playing a role in why people are struggling with togetherness because there's a lot of anxiety around how do you connect. But then I also think there's a lot of anxiety around, I don't want to be as close as you want me to be. And this doesn't feel authentic. It doesn't feel genuine. It's making me feel like it's forced and I'm not ready to go there with you. It's like dating. So think of friendship as dating. Do you marry the person after the first week? Probably not. Right? But do you take the time to court them? You court each other, you date, you get engaged, you get married, and that often happens over a course of time.
I've never heard someone put words to that, but it is so true that even in the past, I have felt that, almost being love bombed in a friendship and me being like, whoa, like I have a lot of close friends and I don't know if this is what I wanted. And maybe I was just looking for a connection in this realm of my life, but not in every realm, kind of like that, friends for different things. It's so crazy that you kind of like are able to put language to it because a lot of us, I feel like, have that same feeling.
A lot of people.
What is that like dynamic? What is it called? I don't know. Like, what is that dynamic called when someone is not best friends with someone, but they're like in a same circle as them? Is that still genuine friendship? Is that still something that benefits? So you're saying it's something that still benefits us.
Absolutely. You can have an acquaintance.
And that still benefits you. That's what's really interesting about what you just said. Like, I think we're all striving for the it's an all or nothing. I need to make a best friend. But you're saying the acquaintances and the people we kind of surround ourselves with are also counting as community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. When I work with my clients around relationships, I teach them something called the circle of support. Mm-hmm. And there are 4 different circles that I have them map out. Mm-hmm. The first circle is your circle of intimacy. Mm-hmm. Think of your most intimate connections. I define my circle of intimacy as if somebody says they're coming to my house, I could care less if there's clothes on the floor, dishes in the sink. Yeah. You get to see me at my worst. Yeah. Because there's so much reciprocity, vulnerability, care. You've earned a place in my life where I feel so deeply intimate with you. I don't have to be concerned about what you might think of me. Yeah. So that's your circle of intimacy. The next circle is your circle of friendship. And I always tell my clients, friendship runs on a spectrum. I think back when I used to go to work, I had work friends. Yeah. We did not hang out outside of work. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed the idea of camaraderie at work. So when I went to work, we chatted, we kikied, we giggled. Yeah. And then when work was over, that's it. I see you tomorrow when I clock back in. Yeah. That's it. Mm-hmm. Some of these people might progress into friendships, but it may not be deep. It may be that we're just an acquaintance and you're the friend that when I want to have brunch on the weekend or go see a movie, I call you and you call me and I'm okay with that. The next level of friendship might be the person who is a very close friend, but then we have this language of best friend. Some people use it, some people don't, but I think it's about recognizing that friendship is a spectrum. Yeah. Each person is going to get a different level of you. Each person is going to get different versions of you because I might be really, really, really vulnerable in one relationship and I might keep things a little surfacey in another because I just don't know you yet. Yeah, I haven't gone deep enough with you to start disclosing certain things, but it doesn't mean we can't get there. Right. Now, the third circle is your circle of participation, and this is important, especially in this day and age of loneliness. It's literally the circles you participate in. I'll always ask people, where did you meet your partner? Many people say in college. That's your circle of participation. At work, that's your circle of participation. At the run club, that's your circle of participation. Right. My new friend that I met her at yoga, circle of participation. If we are not participating in things, we're not going to meet people. So if you work from home, and you are just in your house 24/7, your home now becomes your circle of participation and it's just you there or your family or your kids. So if we don't have that circle of participation, we can't develop our circle of friendship and we can't develop our circle of intimacy. Yeah.
People need to hear that.
Then your fourth domain is your circle of exchange, which is your paid and professional networks. I'm a therapist. I exist in my clients' circle of exchange. We have fun together. We talk. They're super vulnerable with me, but I have to bill them when I'm done. Yeah. Right? That's what the boundary is. I also talk about it, think about women in particular, or even men. They have a barber they go to. Yeah. Women have a hairdresser they consistently go to. Yes. You chat with that person. You tell them all your business when you're sitting in that salon chair. When you're done, you have to pay them, right? It doesn't matter how much fun you had in that moment. So understand that the reason why I'm bringing this up is because even within my circle of exchange, there's still some level of intimacy. Yeah. Which is why I tell my hairdresser everything, which is why my clients are telling me everything. Right. But the boundary is this is still transactional. Yeah. There's still a boundary where you have to pay me. And because that boundary is there, you never have to think to yourself, I wonder if I'm overloading on Mena right now. I'm your therapist. You're supposed to. Right? So I think it's about understanding who belongs in those 4 domains. And if one circle is empty, consider who can go there. If your circle of friendship is empty, that might mean you need to increase your circle of participation. Right. If you realize there are certain resources you're lacking in your life, maybe you need to increase your circle of exchange. Maybe there are some things you have to pay for to get the help that you need. Yeah. A nervous system coach, a therapist, anyone, right, that can offer you some semblance of support that maybe the people in your circle of intimacy can't. And I think the other reason why these 4 circles are so important is because another very common thing is in friendship I hear is when we burn our friendships out because we want one person to be everything to us. Yeah. That can't happen. Yeah. Which is why we need these 4 circles in our lives. Because yes, you can be my best friend, but if I'm struggling severely with addiction, I can't expect my best friend to be an addiction coach. Right. If I'm struggling severely with anxiety and you don't even experience anxiety that often, you may not have the language to help me.
Yeah.
So this is why I need additional support, because it doesn't mean you don't love me or care about me. You're just unequipped.
Yeah. The biggest thing I think I took away from what you said is still this circle of participation, because I think that's the answer for a lot of people struggle with, even like, I'm just moved to a new city and I don't know how to make friends. And I have my like OG people that are my best friends, and maybe they have family, but they don't know how to have those kind of, and that's really, I feel like, what gets me by day to day. When I go to my Pilates class and I'm chatting with the people next to me, or the person at the front desk that I have kind of created this relationship with. So I think that's such a tangible and great thing for people to take away for loneliness.
Yeah.
I think I'm like, I can't believe this went by so fast. I want to ask you everything. Okay, if there's one thing that you would want people to know about community and that they could take with them today, what would it be? Or what's something even that you've learned that was kind of groundbreaking for you that you'd want to share?
I would want people to know that community care is just as important as self-healing. I do think that we are becoming a little more inward with healing. I go to therapy. I read all these books. I listen to podcasts. I really want you to think about the we part. What are you doing in the context of we?
Yeah.
How are we in relationship? How am I engaging with people where we are practicing togetherness? We are practicing social cohesion. We are practicing social connectedness. Because the self-healing part is beautiful and it's necessary. I always tell people self-care is the bridge to community care, but community care is the bridge to community healing.
Yeah.
I bring my full self into community. So I do need to do introspective work, but if I don't know how to be around people, that's going to be hard for me.
Yeah.
So I just encourage people to think about the we just as much as they think about the I.
Yeah. Wow. Mic drop, literally. Thank you so much for coming on today and for chatting through everything. I feel like this was the perfect final episode to this series, and it really rounded everything out. So I really appreciate all of your wisdom. Please tell everyone where they can find you, where they can connect with you, all of the things.
Yes, of course. So they can find me on social media with the name Minaa B, MINAA_B. They can also order my book, Owning Our Struggles, which is available wherever books are sold. I also have a newsletter on Substack called All the Hard Things, and my podcast, This Feels Familiar, is wherever you listen to podcasts.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Carly.